You're standing ankle-deep in a shallow lagoon, fishing net in hand, roughly 10,000 years ago. The water's warm, the fishing is good today. Then you hear it. Feet, a lot of them, crashing through the reeds behind you. You don't get the chance to turn around. Right now, you can walk through a crowd of hundreds of strangers and feel completely safe. Back then, a stranger in the reeds could mean your children never came home. That gap between your world and theirs is the whole mystery. So when did human beings first turn on each other like this? Not in a flash of panic, but with planning, with intent, with something that looks a lot like cruelty. Anthropologists have spent decades trying to pin down exactly that. In 2012, archaeologist Marta Mirazón-Lar and her team from Cambridge's Leverhulme Center for Human Evolutionary Studies uncovered 27 skeletons at a site called Nataruk, near Kenya's Lake Turkana. 10 of the best-preserved bodies showed deliberate violent death, arrow wounds, crushed skulls, wrists that appeared bound before the killing blows landed. One victim was heavily pregnant. Several had been hit more than once, in the head, then again in the knees. Not a chance encounter, a hunt. Everyone assumes cruelty on this scale needed farming, property, kings, something worth killing over. Nataruk happened before agriculture ever reached that part of Africa. These were foragers, the exact people we like to picture as too busy surviving to be cruel. So was Nataruk a one-time horror, or was this simply how things were? 13,400 years ago, in the Nile Valley of Sudan, a cemetery called Jebel Sahaba tells a colder story. First excavated in the 1960s, it was reanalyzed in 2021 by Isabelle Crevecoeur and her team, publishing in Scientific Reports. Of 61 skeletons studied, 67% carried violent injuries, not just fresh wounds. Many showed healed fractures layered under new ones. People who survived one attack lived for years and were attacked again. Everyone assumed Jebel Sahaba was one great battle, one bad afternoon in prehistory. It wasn't. It was dozens of smaller attacks, stretched across generations, probably driven by a drying climate and shrinking water sources. Not a single burst of violence. A habit. If this ran that deep, that early, was it something our species invented, or something we inherited? In 2014, Richard Wrangham of Harvard and Michael Wilson of the University of Minnesota published a study in Nature drawing on 50 years of data across 18 chimpanzee communities. It recorded 152 killings. Attackers outnumbered victims roughly 8-1. Never a fair fight, always a gang ambush against an outsider. Everyone wants cruelty to be a uniquely human failure, something civilization built on top of an innocent animal. But chimpanzees never built a courtroom, a religion, or a border checkpoint, and they still do this, which means the impulse is older than humanity itself. Here's where the evidence gets careful instead of dramatic. Neanderthal skeletons studied since 1995 by Thomas Berger and Eric Trinkhaus showed something strange. Roughly a third had head and neck trauma matching almost no modern activity, except rodeo riding. For years, that was read as proof of brutal fighting. Then researchers found early modern humans living alongside Neanderthals carried nearly identical injuries. The likelier cause wasn't warfare. It was close-range hunting of large, thrashing animals. A reminder that not every old bone with a fracture is a murder victim, and jumping to that conclusion is its own kind of distortion. So what's the real answer buried under all of this? Cruelty was never a single invention with a single date. It looks more like the shadow side of loyalty. The same wiring that let a hunter-gatherer band share food, defend its children, and stay fiercely loyal to each other also drew a hard line around who counted as us. Everyone outside that line became fair game the moment resources got tight. Nataruk's attackers, Jebel Sahaba's repeat raiders, the chimpanzee war parties in Wilson and Wrangham's data, all running the same basic architecture. A circle you'd die for, an outside you could kill without a second thought. Go back to that lagoon. The people crashing through the reeds toward you weren't monsters back at their own camp. They were someone's parents, someone's children, protecting something they loved, the same way you were protecting yours. That's the uncomfortable part of this whole story. Cruelty rarely feels like cruelty from the inside. It feels like loyalty. We traded reed lines for borders, but the geometry never changed. The most dangerous thing early humans ever built wasn't a spear. It was a line between us and everyone else, and we've been defending it, at a cost, ever since. You're standing in a lagoon 10,000 years ago, and the water suddenly isn't safe anymore. This video traces cruelty back through the archaeological record, long before cities, long before farming, long before anything we'd call civilization, to find out where it actually started. Everyone assumes this switch needs desperation, hunger, drought, a fight over resources. It doesn't. In 1954, psychologist Muzaffar Sharif ran a study at a place called Robbers Cave in the hills of Oklahoma. 22 11-year-old boys split into two groups, the Rattlers and the Eagles. Full bellies, no threat of extinction anywhere in sight, nothing at stake at all. Within 48 hours, without being told to compete for anything, the two groups turned on each other. Name-calling first, then flag-burning, raided cabins, fights adults had to physically break up. 22 well-fed American kids, and the us versus them architecture booted up almost on its own. So the lagoon, the cemetery in Sudan, the chimpanzee territory wars, none of it actually needed scarcity to get started. Scarcity just pulls the trigger faster. The gun was already loaded. All it ever needed was a line, us, and everyone standing on the other side of it. Which brings you back to that lagoon one more time. It wasn't really hunger that sent those attackers through the reeds. It wasn't the fish, or the water, or the stored food in the pots. It was a line drawn long before that morning, a line that already decided who counted and who didn't, before a single arrow was loosed. We still draw that line today. We just use passports now, and flags and comment sections, instead of reeds and obsidian. The tools changed. The geometry never did. 10,000 years from now, if someone digs up whatever's left of us, they won't find a mystery either. They'll find the same answer they found at Nataruk. Not that we lack the capacity for kindness, but that our kindness always came with a border, and somebody, somewhere, was always standing on the other side of it.